Welcome, viewers. This is Masroor Pirzado, your host, and today we have with us a very special guest, a distinguished guest, Mr. Manoj Kumar. He is educationist, he is writer, columnist, and having a very good and approach on literature. Today we will talk with him on Shah Latif, and when we say Shah Latif, the greatest poet, for what reasons we call him the greatest, what makes him great. So, Manoj, thank you very much for joining us.
And thank you very much for having me here.
My pleasure. So, when we say that Shah Latif is the greatest poet, first of all, what makes him the greatest poet? What qualities make him one of the greatest poet of Sindh or subcontinent?
Well, when we say that Shah Latif was the greatest, greatest is a very superlative degree, but definitely he was one of the greatest poets of the world. I mean, there are a lot of poets whom we can call great, and Shah Latif was one of them. And he has all those qualities which make any other poet great. I mean, he has that deep philosophy. He has that, range of emotions and subjects that really makes him resonant with art. Look, poetry is a very delicate balance between thought and the art and the craft even. It's not only the thought which makes poetry great, but it should have a great craft as well.
After all, it is art.
It is art. It is a form of art.
Yes.
And as a form of art, it should, fulfill all the requirements that makes any art great. So Shah Latif has those, art and those thought and those everything that combination of all. If you look at his poetry, and he wrote in a very short poems which we call bayat in Sindhi. Usually a bayat ranges from 2 lines to 6 or 8 lines, but even he has that capacity to express a universe of idea in those 2 lines, and with such beauty and with such a mastery that really surprises us when we read his poetry. And I am of the opinion that anyone who reads from anywhere in the world, if he reads Shah Latif with all the majesty of his poetry, would definitely be impressed by his poetry.
But when we say that he's one of the greatest poets of the world, but when we see Rumi and Kabir and these poets, Shah Latif is nothing less than the level of Rumi. But when we see internationally or globally, he looks regional or local. So what are the reasons behind it? How can we give him that due stature which he deserves? Translations or any other things? What would you say about it?
Well, all poets are regional. All poets are regional. They are very much rooted in the land. They are very much rooted among the people.
But we are talking about making him global icon as Rumi is. Rumi is being talked everywhere.
He's talked everywhere because he got certain wonderful translators, and he was branded. There were an effort to make him a global icon.
Okay.
And as in the past, let me give you another example. Umar Khayyam.
So but Umar Khayyam got a great translator.
Fitzgerald.
And so is the case with Rabindranath Tagore when W.B. Yeats translated him.
So definitely.
Shah Latif didn't get such a translator.
Well, Shah Latif didn't get the translators from the West.
Yes.
Only recently, one of the translators, an English translator, Professor Shackle, he translated Shah Latif Bhittai in an idiom that is understood and that can be appreciated by the Western readers. When we say that Rumi has become a global icon, what we actually mean that he is accepted and appreciated by the West, by the Western audience, or in the West he is admired. So why he is admired in the West? Because he got wonderful translations,
Yeah.
and in the language that can be understood, and not only understood but appreciated by the Western readers, and especially English-speaking people. So probably Shah Latif didn't get that kind of a translator
Yes.
who could translate him for the Western reader.
Because when any people from our country or our region would translate Latif, so many has done translations, but it looks regional and local translation. It is not up to the standard of Western literature, I think. Do you agree or not?
Yes, I agree with you. There are two problems. One is Latif is not an easy poet to translate.
Yes.
There are a lot of layers in the poetry of Shah Latif.
And one thing, let me interrupt you, sorry. You can translate words and thoughts, but the beauty cannot be translated.
Definitely. Look,
That the very beauty of art and poetic expressions that cannot be translated.
no, this is what I want to say. Not only the poetry. For example, you know that Shah Latif's poetry, his bayt are within a particular sur or dastan. I mean, to understand Shah Latif's poetry, first of all, you should know the background of that particular dastan. At least you should know the story, what is there. And even Shah Latif didn't write the whole story. He just took the critical moments of that story and the critical, thoughts or critical points, and then he presented those critical points in his path or in his fight. So when you translate any bayt of Latif, first of all, you have to place it in a particular perspective. You have to put it in a context. Second layer is that Shah Latif's poetry exists within a broader intellectual and spiritual context. You have to understand that as well. And for example, you need be familiar with the concept of mysticism. You need to be familiar with the Eastern concept of spirituality. And then there is a wonderful, play of language in the poet. For example, there is alliteration in each of his poetry, or there are metaphors, there are symbols. You need to be familiar with. Even for the modern reader, for the modern Sindhi readers, Latif is not easy to to understand, because if you are not familiar with all these things, you cannot properly understand. You can't properly understand poetry. Now, translating all these things, the whole edifice of his poetry is his dastan, and then his spiritual and mystic connotation, and then his language, and so when you translate it, most of the beauty of Latif is gone. So what
there is a phrase lost in translation.
Lost in translation. And somehow, sometimes 70% of Latif's beauty is lost in that translation.
Yes.
Latif's poetry it belongs to a particular era. There is vocabulary of that particular era. Latif's poetry is rooted in a particular geographical location, its flora, its fauna, lands and mountains and lakes.
But yet he is universal.
He is universal. He is universal. But that universality of Latif is very much rooted in the local context. For example, if you take Sassi, if you take out those mountains and the names of mountains and all these areas, Latif's poetry will lose a significant portion of it. So is the case with the Surkamod. It is very much in the context of the Kinjar Lake and all the plants and all these the scenery, even the breeze and the wind, and so this is one of the reasons that Latif cannot be translated with all his majesty in any
Yes.
other language.
Yes.
And
That's true.
that is one of the reasons that Latif couldn't get what I would say good translations.
What about the validity? How is his relevance still in this modern world when we are in the age of technology? How technology can be helpful to spread his message more widely, or what would be your stance over this age, modern age, and Latif, how relevant he is?
Well, I think that even all these, what we'd call modern age and the modern expressions, human being is still same. He possesses the same, uh, what would say, emotions. He still has the same struggle. He has still same spiritual
Human being
quest.
and their problems are same.
Still they are same. So what I want to say that Latif's poetry is very much relevant today because
Right.
we are still facing the same problems. For example, what Latif talks about? Latif talks about the meaning of life.
Yes.
Latif talks about love. Latif talks about passion. Latif talks about struggle. Latif talks about finding your destination. Latif talks about what is like to be human. Latif talks about how you can view this whole universe, and Latif talks about what is your position in this universe, how you can relate with the God. So all these questions which Shah Latif has dealt with in his poetry are very much relevant today. So I would say that his poetry is very much relevant to the modern man. The second part of your question is how can we spread his message? So this I mean modern communication tools, they give us opportunity to conceptualize Latif's visually. There are AI tools where which we can use to make his poetry available in other language. There are mediums where Latif's poetry and all they can be presented on various media. So I believe that this is probably the best of age to talk about Latif and his poetry.
I think technology has brought many facilities which can be very much favorable in using or spreading Latif's message
Yeah,
as compared in the past.
Yes, in the past there were a lot of restrictions. For example, if you translate Latif's poetry in English, anyone who, even someone who doesn't know English but he lives in, say, in Latin America, or he is from Arab world, there are translation apps where you can make his poetry available in as many languages as possible.
AI has
AI has made it possible to
Yes.
understand his poetry. Similarly, in the past, if you want to visually represent Latif, there were not many avenues available. But now you have, in the digital forms, you have avenues available, you have tools available where you can visualize the poetry of Latif and make it accessible to anyone.
Now, coming to the point of translations again, Latif has been translated in English by many translators, authors. How much are you satisfied with their work?
Look, it's not matter of my satisfaction because I'm a native. I can understand Latif in his original language. Definitely, in last 30 or 40 years, Latif got some wonderful translators. In the past, he also got good translators. Even Sole translated a portion of this poetry, and then there was Mrs. Elsa Kazi who translated a part of it. And then there is Aga Yaqub, I personally like his translation because not only translate Latif's poetry, but he relates his message to the Persian and Arabic poets. And one of the best translations I have ever read is by Madam Amina Khamisani.
Very good.
She not only understood the spirit and the essence of Latif, she was herself chairperson of English department. So a translator should have expertise in both languages.
Both languages, and he
And
should
that
be
Madam Amina
much
Khamis
aware of the background and
background,
all
yes.
these things of
So Madam Amina Khamisani had that rare quality of having expertise not
in
only
both
both
languages.
languages, but she understood the Shah Latif's and nuance of his poetry, and she also understood English and how to express. So recently there has been, I told you, Professor Christopher Shackle, he translated Latif's poetry. So these Shackles are, Madam Amin Khamisari's translations are quite good. But once again, the question is, it's not my satisfaction, it's how the people of that particular language, the native speaker,
How they conceive
how
them.
they conceive it, how they understand the idiom in which that particular translation is made, or does it? I mean, is it in the modern, what I would say, expression, the expression of the age? So, yes, I would say that somehow it is lacking, that
Yes.
the modern expressions and the modern sensibilities are missing from the translations which are, made of Latif's poetry.
Thank you very much, Manoj, for your very insightful talk, and we hope you will be again here in our next episode. We will request you to come again and again.
Definitely, whenever you ask.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Viewers, this is what we had for Shah Latif, and we wanted to talk about his translation, his level of poetry, international level. How can we make him a global icon with translations and new technology? So this is all for the now. This is Masroor Pirzada. Thank you very much.